Hello, friends, and welcome to the Cucina Aurora Kitchen Witchery podcast. On an exhilarating episode of Conversational Witchcraft, I'm totally fangirling because we have the amazing Sophie Saint Thomas. Okay, I need you to understand how fantastic she is. I totally stalk her all over social media. Sorry, Sophie, I can't help myself. Sophie Saint Thomas is an award-winning journalist and author based in New York City, and originally from the U.S. Virgin Islands. Her exhaustive list of bylines includes Vice, Playboy, GQ, Glamour, Marie Claire, Pride, Cosmopolitan, High Times, Gawker, Harper's Bazaar. I mean, she's amazing. She is the author of 5 books: Finding Your Higher Self, A Little Book of CBD for Self-Care, Sex Witch, Magickal Spells for Love, Lust, and Self-Protection, and the forthcoming Glamour Witch and Weed Witch, which we'll talk about after our break today. Previously, she's worked as a columnist for Vice, producer for MTV Networks, and Refinery 29's sex staff writer. She's the co-creator and author of the intimacy journal, A Sex and Cannabis Log Book. Oh my God. Sophie Saint Thomas. I keep saying I need like a clap track. I need like a roar of applause.
Like Friends.
Like friend. Yeah, I need that.
Like
Especially
I'm Rachel Green right now.
well, you have a little of that New York City metropolitan amazingness happening.
They have kind of like the what's that called? The hairstyle that is short.
Was it the
layered? I have layers.
Layers. That was very big in the 90s.
Thank you. That was a very flattering introduction.
You are legit one of my favorite witches that I follow online. I love pretty much everything about you. And I only just found out right before we started recording that you too are a Scorpio bitch. So
yes.
Hell yes. That's super fun. But no, for real, like I think we have an acquaintance. I think Gabby is a common acquaintance of ours.
Yes. And another wonderful sex and weed witch.
Another wonderful. So I would never classify myself as a sex witch. I'm a kitchen witch, but I'm a Scorpio woman. So yeah, I guess I am.
I think it's all the same. I don't think we have to be picky and choosy about labels. I mean, it's, it's witchcraft. It's all a bit silly on purpose, isn't it?
It's all a little bit, I don't know if I would use the word silly, but I would definitely use the word maybe unique, or like, I love the phrase that is thrown around a lot of times in the witchcraft community that, or at least I haven't heard it, but when I was coming up, that all acts of love and pleasure are my rituals. And I feel like that is what we're about. We're about sensuality. We're about, joy in all of its forms, whether that is through food or sensual pleasures or, silliness, whatever that means is what I define.
Yeah, I guess I really like how fun it is. And just, to me, doing tarot or reading my horoscope at times can feel like, maybe this looks like books about self-care, a little fun and a little frivolous. And I mean that in a good way.
Yes.
Making up a love potion is like kind of a bougie, sneaky, evil, dark mistress thing to do. But it's also, witchcraft gets a lot of shit. And I'm not saying you're doing this, but I feel like to defend that, a lot of witches are very like, no, this is like real. We are witches. This is serious. And obviously I think it's serious. I've written 3 books on the topic now, but I also think it should be allowed to be really fun. I think that it's important to remember that our brains are big and capable of having fun and taking things seriously at the same time.
Yes. And I feel like it doesn't have to be so serious, right? Like whatever witchcraft you practice it's so personal. It's so individual. And if you want to be that person that's like, no, this is how it is, and we must call the corners in this particular way, and we have to, that is awesome for you.
No, that works for some people.
Yeah. But if you want to be like, I'm going to do my makeup and drink a glass of wine, and this is going to be my beauty ritual.
That's glamour magic.
That's glamour magic. And neither one is more or less valid. You know, do you get a lot of shade like for
No,
that?
not that I'm aware of. But I think it would be okay if I did, just because I think I would say what I just said to you. You know, it's
Right.
not, it's an accurate opinion. Gosh, I don't know.
I love, no, I love that. I love that because oftentimes, and I've had this conversation with other people on the show, right? Like, I'm a kitchen witch. I am not a psychic. I'm not really what I would call
I need to hear more about the kitchen witch stuff too, because I'm finally a cook for the first time in my life. It's true. I moved in with my partner during COVID.
Yep.
And I got really into cooking. And I'd already been doing things like, you know, making my own cannabis oil and stuff that felt a little kitchen witchy.
Yeah.
But I need to know like where the magic begins and when the cooking begins, or where they overlap, or
Yeah.
what. Anyways, so you
Well, I have a couple of books on the subject. I mean, no, well, you know, kitchen witchery is, and there's a lot of things I was, you know, looking through your book that you have a couple things in here. You've got those candied rose petals.
Oh, those are wonderful.
They're wonderful. And in my book, my most recent book, which is kitchen witchery for love and romance, and it's basically love, sex, aphrodisiac magic through food. But I have a recipe for red velvet cake with a rose,
Wow,
cream
that's my
cheese
partner's favorite
frosting.
too. I'll have to get that recipe.
It's so good. And I use candied rose petals on it.
Oh,
So
wow.
so I was like, oh my gosh, she's got the same recipe as I do. So obviously this shit works. But kitchen witchery, and this is not supposed to be about me, right? But kitchen witchery is just like every other magic. It comes from you and your intention and, you
Mhm.
know, where you start. You don't have to be a great cook. You don't
Yeah.
have to be like cooking gourmet meals. You could be like, I'm going to eat this macaroni and cheese that I'm going to microwave, but I know it's going to fill my heart up with comfort. And I know it's going to make me feel closer to my grandma who used to whip up a batch of Kraft mac and cheese for me when I was sad. And so I'm putting that intention into my food. And then I take that food into my body. Bing, bang, boom, kitchen witchery, right? Like that's pretty much the
I
basis.
should be putting more spells into my food. How foolish of me.
It's not, people don't.
All the love spells I could have been putting on my boyfriend this whole time. I'm gonna start tonight.
Well, I'm not going to say that it works, but my partner and I have been together for 22 years.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Wow.
22 years.
Congrats.
Thank you. And we super love each other and we're super best friends and we still have great sex. So I've got to be doing something right. I mean, we're chubby, but we're happy.
Well, that's what's important. I mean, food has been a display of affection and love for as long as humans have existed.
Mm-hmm. And sex and
so is sex.
pleasure.
Yeah.
Right. These things are all, they all have hedonistic qualities, right? Food, you know, you think about, you know, feeding your partner and, you know, how that ignites passion in a lot of ways. And if you just know what foods specifically have those properties, they're really easy to incorporate into sex magic, you know. Okay, so I said that I'm a giant fan of yours, and I was not lying. I have the Sex Witch book, and if you can see in it, for those of you watching this video, I have post-it notes in the margins of all the things that I think are fucking outstanding. So I know that you have been a writer for a long time. And so before I get too much into being obsessed with this book, I kind of want to know, how did you go from the Virgin Islands to writing about sex witchcraft? Like, tell us about you, Sophie, for people who don't stalk you on Facebook and don't stalk you on Instagram. How did you get here?
Like the Talking Head song, like you may ask yourself, well, how did you get here?
Yeah.
As I look out at my view of Manhattan.
It's a big deal.
Well, I always wanted to be a writer. I always wanted to live in New York City. Growing up in the Caribbean was really beautiful and wonderful and something I'm so grateful for. And my father and my step family still live down there, so I get to stay connected to that community, which is lovely. But I had an uncle who lives in New York City, and actually the first time I ever saw snow as a child was like New York City snow, but all I had seen before that was Island. So I thought it was like the most gorgeous snow ever, like the filthy, what I know now is like filthy, like New York City street snow.
Do you fucking hate it now?
No, I still love it.
You do love it?
I always wrote, I always read. Those two things were always really important to me. I was raised in a very loose, I wasn't raised religiously. Both my parents are very liberal, and to be honest, I had a lot of freedom as a child. And I think I've always written about sex, to be honest. I tried to write about sex in college. They didn't really like that because I went to college in the South in North Carolina. And that was even talking about things like open relationships seemed to be even too controversial in like, what was this, like 2008, 2010. But I finally got a job for an intern at a casting role at the show for the cable station A&E when I was in college. And that wasn't even through college. I kind of think college is like a waste of money, to be honest with you.
For a lot of people it is.
But I spent a summer in New York doing that. And I also was working at a Japanese restaurant selling comedy show tickets in Times Square, which is wild.
Well, when you live in New York, you have to have 87 jobs to survive.
You do.
And I say that as a native New Yorker.
Yeah,
you have to. I mean, I'm not from the city, I'm from the island, but it's the same situation. I mean, you have to have 1,000 jobs to survive. So, that makes perfect sense.
I don't know if I'm rambling about what you want to hear.
I want to hear everything.
Through that internship, I got my first job offer, which was a production assistant on a music documentary at MTV. And that was because I stayed friends with someone from that internship. Wow. And I also kept up a music blog just because I love to write. And I actually used to do music journalism. The first writing I did professionally in New York City was music journalism for Vice, like forever ago.
Yeah.
And it ended up being just kind of all connections. And if we want to talk about it in which words, like manifestation.
Yes.
Regarding things like drugs and sex, I think it's been very handy that I never had a negative, I was never taught anything negative about them. So I felt very comfortable writing about them. I've always just been a very sexual person. I've always been drawn to drugs and substances and just all the nitty grittiness of it, from its uses as a medicine to its uses in witchcraft to its uses as a social tonic to how different people react differently. It all just fucking fascinates me. Mm-hmm. And so, fortune favors the bold. I learned that here in New York. Most of what I've gotten by asking for it.
Yeah.
My first book deal by asking the publisher. I got my agent by sliding into his DMs. I learned about magic from growing up around some hoodoo and voodoo traditions that were fairly not normalized, like they were still very taboo, but they were talked about in the islands. First lived in the East Village when I moved to New York City, not across the street, a few blocks down from a store called Enchantments, which is a beautiful witch shop.
I love Enchantments. Oh, yeah, great. I know.
Yes. And I was like just already raised on like Harry Potter. I know that it's canceled now, but I adapted to it really easily. I became best friends with Annabelle Gatt, who is Vice's astrologer, and in my opinion, like the best astrologer of the witches. No shade to everyone else, including myself, who is an astrologer.
No, Annabelle's she's pretty badass as well. If you don't know who Annabelle is, you should check her out. She's someone else that I stalk, but I actually haven't met. And I feel like I really need to.
She's great. She's wonderful. I consider her a mentor as well as a friend. She has kind of been in this world since she was born. So I've learned a lot from her.
Yeah.
And then, you're a Scorpio. I'm a Scorpio, which is the detective of the zodiac, known for a passion to investigate, which is great for being a journalist, which is awful for the people you date because you know like every single thing about all of their,
I want to know everything,
and all of their ex-girlfriends, and like more than they do. You just look into it so much.
Yeah.
I'm a journalist. I have worked for MTV until I could switch to writing full time. But the whole time, you learn about these subjects and there's always more to learn.
Yeah.
And my interest in my career just gradually built, as did my knowledge.
Yeah.
I also feel like things are just starting. So there's a lot of excitement.
It's really, so that's really interesting to learn your background like that, because I don't think we can separate our career paths from our witchcraft paths. I think a lot of people try to do that, but who we are as individuals is so intertwined in what we do, plus how we feel, plus where we came from and all of that stuff. And listening to you talk about this sort of liberal upbringing. Now, I don't know much about being raised in a Caribbean island. Okay. So like I was born and raised on Long Island. So very, very exactly what you think Long Island, New York is like. It's loud, obnoxious Italians. And I say that as one of the loud, obnoxious Italians.
No, this was like being allowed to drink liquor on the beach when you were in middle school and no one bats an eye.
Right. But that's cultural, right? It's like if for me, the only thing I could, compare that to is like, if you grew up in Italy, wine is on the table.
Yeah.
Wine is on the table. True. It's not taboo. So if it's not taboo, it doesn't become something dirty or naughty or scary. It's just like,
although I did have to quit drinking. This is actually cannabis infused iced tea that I'm enjoying.
Mm-hmm.
I highly recommend it.
Do you see what I'm saying though? Like that.
No, I do.
It doesn't become taboo. So you feel like, oh, it's okay if I want to experiment with this, but because it's not forbidden, you don't overindulge because you're like, I tried it. If my parents are cool with something, maybe it's not that cool. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Not to sound like a conservative or anything, because I'm not, but I have to be honest. I wish I had a little more structure though.
That's so interesting.
I wish, looking back on it, I think of some of the situations I was allowed to be in and I was like, someone probably should have gotten that kid out of there, or like at least
let my kid do that.
But I love you, mom and dad, but just it's interesting. Like I think I should have had a few more boundaries actually. So I guess the grass is always greener.
But that is interesting. And you're not the first person that I've heard say that, because I had a really conservative Catholic upbringing, right? Like I wasn't allowed to date. Like I wasn't.
My parents like got me hotel rooms that I could bring boyfriends in with. Like they slept over.
That's insane. See, that is a little insane, right? That's especially if your kid is like 14. Like I don't know. Like
this was when I was like a senior in high school, but still, it was still. Yes, very, very liberal.
Right? Like I told you before, I've been with my partner for 22 years. We were dating for 3 years. We were engaged for 3 years before we got married. We both still lived home. My parents wouldn't let him come upstairs.
Oh, wow.
Into my room when we were engaged. After we'd been engaged for 3 years, together for 6 years. It was like, I was like, well, have a TV. We're just going to watch a movie. Like, that's the level of conservative. I'm like, I'm 26. I've been with this guy for 6 years. Like you can't, I had a curfew at 25 years old. Like that's the reality that I grew up in. And so everything that I learned was all like, shh, don't say anything. And, so can you remember in talking about like, obviously there was, like you said, you would have a drink on the beach and you were a kid and sexually active and all that stuff, which we were all doing, but we were all hiding it from our parents. Like it's not that we weren't doing it. It's just our parents didn't know about it.
No, my parents like knew way too much. It makes me cringe to think about, actually.
I mean, I get that. I get that. But I think that, again, grass is always greener, right? Like there were times where I was in trouble, or there were times where I was confused and I didn't have an adult to talk to about it, questions to ask, especially when it came to like my body and sex and stuff like that. And I didn't have a parent or someone that I could go to and say, I'm really confused about this, So tell me where the intersection of being very sexual, experimenting with substances, being this creative person, right? Because you're creative, you're writing, you're into music, you're into all of these things. Where does that all intersect with witchcraft?
Well, if you're a witch, it's basically your spiritual practice. So it intersects with everything.
Well, I mean, like when you were developing, when you were growing up as a kid, like, was it just like you said, you grew up with
Oh,
hoodoo influences and voodoo
no,
influences?
I wouldn't say I grew up with that. Just things like if you saw sigils like drawn on something, you might know that someone who practiced that did it. Or like I know people who had hot foot powder sent to them, which is a powder that if you step on, it's supposed to like send you away. Just kind of actually kind of funny stories like that. Let's see. Well, I would say, I mean, Rastafarianism for drugs and spirituality, because, you know, to them, cannabis is a sacrament.
Yeah.
And I spent a lot of time in Jamaica. I love it there so much. And, you know, there's like a pipe that they smoke out of that is considered holy. And it's the way you make it, it's like with a coconut and a bamboo. And there is like a calling in of like the earth, air, fire, water, of like all the elements before you smoke the weed, which you realize you do need all four elements with. And
Sure.
my parents weren't Rastafarians. My parents are white expats, but I had friends whose parents were Rastafarians, and they were like, no, yeah, my dad smokes weed. It's his religion, you know? And so, and I loved that. I don't know. I was just always like this, to be honest with you.
Was there ever a time where you were introduced to what we would consider modern witchcraft?
Probably not until I walked into enchantments. Like,
what was that
officially.
like? What was that moment like where you're like, oh crap, this totally makes sense to me?
No, it was actually like kind of intimidating and slightly awful.
No.
Well, they're just like, you know, really legit witches, or
Yeah.
like that's what they present. So if you've like never been in that before,
Yeah.
and you're like, I want books about witchcraft, and they start asking you questions and you don't know what any other word is. And if you've ever been to that shop, and like they've just have like a black cat that just sits there on the cashier and doesn't move and just like stares you down, like it's definitely owned by witches, like 100%.
Yeah.
And I was just, this was just my own insecurities and anxieties, but I just said, when I went in and asked for like some books, and then I realized that it was such a ginormous subject, and how I probably just sounded like I had no idea what I was talking about. So that's why I was embarrassed. But now I love going there. I'll go there and have, especially if I need a potion made, that's where I'll
Yeah.
go.
Yeah, they're really good about making potions. And last I checked,
Candles.
their candles, right? Their candles are like,
Well, I have loved candle magic. I make all my own candles
do
now.
you?
I have one burning now. I try to have one always burning, but I get busy. But yes, I highly recommend their candles. The only reason I don't buy them from them anymore is because I find it more powerful if I do it myself, and I just enjoy it. It's just like a super crafty,
Yeah.
hands-on, fun spell.
Yeah,
Fun. You keep
absolutely.
using that word, fun.
Fun. I think that's something too that you really hit the nail on when you're talking about witchcraft and everything that you do, because there is an element of fun, but not just, I don't want to say fun like, oh, haha, I'm having a fun time, but like the joyful fun you get when you're really connected to, I want to use the word spirit, but it sounds so fucking, trite to say that, but like there's a joyful freedom that comes when you're practicing or doing things like making candles or making those candied rose petals we were talking about. There's a joy in it, right? Like, and when you're doing it yourself, you feel that joy a lot more than if you're, listen, I get a lot more joy out of making a homemade
I mean,
pizza than I do
I
from
think
ordering a pizza.
I think vices are really important. I'm one of my favorite gods is like Dionysus,
Mm-hmm.
the god of wine, or just the idea that we're, having sex because it feels good is okay, or drinking wine because it gets you drunk is okay, or
Mm-hmm.
enjoying cannabis because it gets you stoned is okay.
Yeah.
You're allowed to enjoy the pleasures and the fruit of the earth. There's a lot of that in magic, and there's not a lot of that in kind of the traditional Christian patriarchal social structure we see, but that's one of the things I love the most about witchcraft, actually, is that it tells you like, no, like you should like take that bubble bath and masturbate and like smoke a joint or have a glass of wine while you do it. And like, here's all these ways you can turn it to a spell if you want. And
Well, that pleasure, right? I mean, human beings do things for pleasure. Our brains are so evolved that we have such amazing pleasure receptors. And when you get into like, I know this is super nerdy, right? But like when you get into like neuroscience and how our brains work with all the serotonin and oxytocin and dopamine, these pleasure receptors and these pleasure chemicals that go off in our brains, we're kind of like biologically hardwired for pleasurable experiences, which keep us going back to doing those pleasurable experiences, right? Masturbating in a bubble bath feels good. You want to do it. Once you do it, you're like, oh, I'm gonna schedule that. I make time to do that again. You know, and like you said, that's ritual. That's a self-care ritual, right?
I don't know if we're getting completely off the topic of magic, but have you heard of the experiment Rat Park?
No.
It, not to sound like a conspiracy theorist, but maybe the government doesn't want you to know, but I recommend keeping up with the author and Dr. Judy Holland if you're interested in like the latest research on drugs and pleasure. But you know, there's a lot of studies done on rats regarding drugs like cocaine that factored into what fueled the war on drugs movement that epically failed, you know, led by the Reagans. And there's this one, I'm sure there's more than one experiment, but they showed that mice became addicted to cocaine. You know, like if you gave them like a little tap in their, you know, mice cell or whatever, they just kept going back to the cocaine until they basically like their little heart exploded and they died. And it was like, okay, cocaine is addictive, which it is. Cocaine is addictive.
Absolutely.
But these other scientists who did not get as much attention wanted to see the effects of like community and love compared to isolation. So they, you Google this because it's epic. They made a rat park, like a amusement park for rats. Like they made a heaven for rats. Like it was filled with other rats. There was things to play on. There was things to run in. It was like the opposite of an isolated single cell. It was rat paradise. And they had food, water, and they did have the cocaine. And that one, none of the rats became addicted to cocaine. They did, however, just like all fuck each other. But it's true.
Yeah, no. And now that you've mentioned that, I remember reading that study a few months ago. I feel like it's circulated. And yeah, that they created this space where these animals had community, they had entertainment, they had challenges, they had exercise, they had fresh air, they had everything that a being could want. And they actually used the drug recreationally. They would go take a little bit and then they would go about their life. And then a couple of days later, they come back and be like, I'm gonna have a little bit because I feel like I have a little fun. But none of them gave themselves a heart attack for ODing on the drug.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think I just find stuff like that, drugs, fascinating. And you know, I gave another example would be, you know, some of the early Hindu texts talk about spirituality and cannabis, especially when used together with yoga. To me, it's not even, it's just very natural. It's just enhances my meditation and what, you know, one would call intuition or another person might call like psychic powers, especially if I'm working with tarot. So it always felt like a natural witch enhancement tool just on its own. So I feel like, to be honest, I didn't put a ton of thought of it into it.
You know, that's really interesting that you mentioned, you know, the excuse me, the enhancement of a meditation practice, the enhancement of a yoga practice. I'm going to be like super honest with you. I've never smoked pot. I have a problem with the actual smoke. So it's not my jam. I am also a giant ass control freak, and I don't like the way I feel when I am under an influence of any substance. So
friends like that.
Yeah, I'm just and again, that's not to say that I don't enjoy a glass of wine. That does not to say that I don't take CBD every night before I go to bed because of the benefits.
No, it's
you know,
fine. My boyfriend can't do the weed thing at all.
I just can't. But that's just my biology. But
yeah, we all have different ones.
Yeah. I'm interested to know how you feel about, like, do you think it's possible for someone like me who does not partake to get to the same level of meditation, insightfulness, as someone like you who is enhancing that experience? Is that possible?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think whatever you need, maybe some people need to be sober. Like wine is always like used ritualistically in witchcraft. For me, cannabis really helps me with creativity, and that's great in problem solving in life.
Yeah.
It's always why I meditate, and I also use it in the early development and kind of outlining of books, especially because it's not so great for grammar, but it's great for creativity.
I can see that.
I'm also like an anxious person, which gets in the way of meditation. And so when I use cannabis, which I do have a medical card for, for anxiety, and it lowers my anxiety, I meditate better. But you might have a lower anxiety level. For me, maybe if you took cannabis, it would actually amplify your anxiety, which you can't do to some people.
Right.
So I would never prescribe a correct way. I would just say, it would be a lot easier if I could say yes, but I think everyone has to figure it out for themselves, kind of through safe trial and error.
Yeah.
But I do think if people interested, if there is room for like psychedelics and use with me, I'm not original to say that psychedelics have been used in spiritual enhancement. So
no, of course not. No, it's been something that's a conversation that's been going on for, decades at this point, maybe centuries. There are definitely stories of people smoking all kinds of things to get to higher levels of consciousness throughout history. So that's not, like you said, that's not a new concept. So I want to switch gears a little bit, and I want to get back to some of your background again. I want to get back into Sex Witch because it's just so good. So I'm, we were talking earlier about the difference in our upbringings, right? And for me, like, everything was taboo, but I was very interested in sex, and I was interested in boys, and I was interested in all those things at a very early age. And I don't know if that's just because I'm a Scorpio or because I've been a horn dog since I hit puberty. I don't know. But that's always been me. Has that always been you as well?
Yes.
Matter of fact, yes. So I can remember reading erotica at a very early age, and it had a huge impact on me. It was sort of something I kind of stumbled upon, and I grew up, I'm guessing I'm much older than you, and I grew up without the internet.
I got the internet when I was in grade school.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
I graduated high school in 1997 when the internet was.
I'm 34.
So I'm a few years, maybe a few
Okay.
years. I'm many years older than you. But I graduated high school in 1997. So we had just had the internet for like a minute. We had dial-up in my house when I was 18. There was one computer. We didn't have access to things like the pornography that you could find now, or even just if you're interested in erotica, you weren't you weren't going on FetLife in 1997. Okay. That wasn't a thing. So we had to find things the old fashioned way.
Yeah.
Is there a moment you can remember? Like, I had this one book that I found and read over and over again. I still have my copies. It was the Anne Rice beauty books.
Oh, I know Anne Rice. I've not read the beauty books.
Oh my God.
I know Anne Rice is on my checklist. I'm going through several. Yes, I will get there. I promise.
So she wrote these books under a pen name, which, to be fair, I can't remember what the pen name was. It's like A-N-A-N something French. I don't really remember what it is. I'm sure somebody's going to comment on this when they see it, that it's whatever it is. She wrote this series of 3 books based on Sleeping Beauty, but they start when Sleeping Beauty wakes up. And how the prince wakes her up, and then she goes on this journey of servitude as a submissive, and it's just, I mean, I was like 15 years old. I should not have been reading these books, and I love them.
You have. I have to read them though now. Definitely, I'll add them to my list.
They are so fantastic. And again, I haven't read them in a million years, but was there something like that? Like for me, that was like a sexual awakening and going, oh my God, this is wow, like to the point where like I was sharing it with my friends. I'm like, you guys, you got to read this. And I thought it was the greatest thing in the world. And everybody's like, that's fucking weird. Why are they painting this woman with gold leaf and carrying her around a room? I'm like, you don't want to be painted with gold leaf and carried around a room? It's like the hottest thing I've ever heard of in my life. Was there something like that for you, Sophie, that kind of like made you click and go, oh, that's hot? It was that in the Guns N' Roses November Rain video, if I'm being entirely honest. Because Axl Rose in the 90s, fucking gorgeous.
I mean, do you want more like middle school, like turn on moments, or do you want like sexuality origin stories?
I want to know what's the first thing that comes to your head when I ask that question.
I'm not allowed to, it sucks. One of mine was ruined because we got canceled. But I will say when I was in middle school and I saw the Dope Show video by Marilyn Manson, it was a very big moment in my life.
Just because he's a dick doesn't mean that moment wasn't profound for you.
Well, I didn't have all the information at the time, but growing up in the Virgin Islands, we mostly had reggae and hip hop on the radio, which I love both genres. Yeah. But I never just like heard anything like it. And I knew I was bisexual at a very young age, to be honest. I had an attraction to friends and boys. And so he just comes out in that video and it's like a guy, if you don't know the video, he has like tits and a dick, basically, to be very vulgar. It's just like, I had never seen anyone like fuck with gender before. Yes. And I had never seen someone who I was attracted to from both the masculine and the feminine. And so that was big for me. But unfortunately, I feel like I'm going to get comments for saying that now.
No, not at all. Not at all. Because again, like that moment was profound for you. Yeah. And just because Marilyn Manson turned out to be this, like, okay, I'm sorry. I'm a huge Harry Potter fan.
I know.
JK is a fucking douche. But that doesn't mean that I don't love Harry Potter. Like I have a Harry Potter tattoo. There's nothing.
Profound effect on me. Yeah.
Right. The profound effect on you and what it means to you. It doesn't just unmean something to you because that person wound up being an asshole, just like if you lost your virginity to somebody who wound up being a cheating, lying asshole doesn't mean.
I know what my more PC version of that is. The other time that happened to me was in, and everyone can relate to this, is obviously David Bowie as the Goblin King.
Could you not stop looking at his package?
And like I've rewatched that movie and it's so kinky. He like abducts this like 16-year-old Jennifer Connelly, and
who's also fucking gorgeous. Can we please?
Gorgeous, but there's obviously like sexual and romantic chemistry between them. But he's like holding her baby brother Hijack, anyways. But he's holding a whip the whole time.
I know.
And the makeup and the bulge, it's just that also was like, I want that.
Like you're watching it and you're like, I have no idea what I'm seeing right now, but I'm feeling all these feelings in my body and I don't know what that means. And like, maybe I shouldn't look at it, but I want to look at it.
Yeah. I'm kind of obsessed with David Bowie. I have see, this is my orange cat.
Oh, that's cat. He's so
and then
cute.
On top of my desk, this is my desk artwork, is David Bowie with
the cat. With your cat. Oh my God. And that's why you're Bowie cat.
Yes.
Oh my God. I love it so much. No, listen, David Bowie in Labyrinth was one of those moments, right? Where you're like, if you look at things that we recognize in pop culture, they really affect us. They really affect the way we see the world and the way we see ourselves. And the way we see gender and the way we see what that's how we figure out what we like. If you didn't see anything out there, you wouldn't know, oh, that's hot,
True.
It was gorgeous. He was gorgeous. And then they go to the masquerade ball.
The masquerade ball. I know. It's like,
right? Like I mean, I don't know. That was my fantasy forever. Yes, whisk me away to this masquerade ball and give me this gorgeous dress and sing to me as you whisk me around this room. Oh, I'm your prisoner. I guess that sucks. Not to say that you shouldn't go abducting people, but
no, I'm telling you, like, I feel like if the movie came out now, it would be slightly problematic. They'd be like, why is this old guy abducting her and like using sexual coercion and then like stealing a baby? But 100% killed that role.
100%. 100%. All right, listen, on that note, we're going to take a quick break. And then we're going to come back and we're actually going to talk about your fucking amazing book. So let's take 2 seconds, hear from our awesome sponsors, and we'll be right back with the amazing Sophie Saint Thomas. I'm so excited. Okay, we'll be right back. We are back on a tantalizing conversation with the amazing Sophie Saint Thomas, author of many things, but right now we're going to talk about Sex Witch, baby. Oh, it's such a good book. Sex Witch, Magickal Spells for Love, Lust, and Self-Protection. I love everything. Okay, I'm just gonna be like, but I love that a book about sex magic features self-protection. Can we talk, first of all, why Sex Witch? Why did you write this book? And why did you decide to write it now? Like when you decided to write it? What was the impetus for this?
I wrote it because I got mad.
Okay, tell the story. Tell it.
There's not much of a story. Well, there is. It's just I saw people using the term sex witch, and as a witch and like a sex journalist and author, obviously I was interested, and it was really like what felt to me like turfy moon cycle, kind of really gross stuff. And I was like, that's not a fucking sex witch. Like, I'm gonna
so bitch, let me show you what a sex witch is.
No, it was totally that vibe. It was like, I am going to own that title by writing a book on it, how it should be, before someone like these moon cycle turfs do.
Yeah.
So that my publisher Weiser, they specialize in occult titles, and I just reached out and pitched it to them, and they went for it. It was really fun to write it because I was single when I wrote that book. So I like I'm dated people, but like for the most part I was single. So I just was in like a really like give no fuck state of my life.
Yeah. And it comes across because like everything in here is like, get a fucking candle and do this fucking thing. And if that person doesn't fucking like it, well then fuck them. And I'm like, oh, I love it. So you've been in New York a while. You could tell.
It felt really, really good to write it. And I'm really proud of it.
You should
That's my probably my favorite child of the ones that are out, if I'm being honest. Just because I got to be very raw in it, which is fun as a writer.
It really is so good. And it's, don't judge a book by its cover, right? Everybody's like, going to be like, oh, sex witch. It's not at all what you think it is. It's so educational. And it's so, especially for people who maybe aren't familiar with this type of witchcraft or different types of sexuality, you really explore that. You go through gender identity, you go through kink identity, you go through sexuality identity. And so you give people, I think, help with language and verbiage that they might not have or might not think they need. And yeah, there's an edge to it, but you are so respectful and you are so concerned, about so many things. Like, okay, one of my favorite things in the book, and I have a bunch of things, like I said, I have all these little notes in here. One of my favorite things is this spell you have in here for protection for sex workers. And I think that is first of all, again, like the fact that you've got a book about sex magic and you have so much protection magic in there is very important. Can you speak to why that's so important?
Well, because, rape and sexual assault exists. And I find that most people who are drawn to witchcraft, not always, but usually have felt like outcasts for one reason or another. And sometimes that means someone who has been bullied on. So I think it's something that's needed. But I mean, sex workers are holy to me in witchcraft. I believe their current stance is that they're for decriminalization rather than full legalization. I have helped a friend in a dungeon, but I don't think I've earned the right to call myself a sex worker. But I have to say, those like 15 minutes compared to the awful temp work I did stocking sodas for a hedge fund to supplement my writing made me really wish that I had been a dominatrix.
Yeah.
But it's just fucking ridiculous to me that would be regulated and controlled by the government. I love sex workers. If you don't know any sex workers, I highly recommend making some sex worker friends. They're like the realest people.
The realest, most loving,
Yeah.
generous people. I have to agree with that 100%. I have a handful of friends that are sex workers, and the like, I can't even describe how wonderful these people are. And I think that the stigma around sex work is starting, thank goodness, starting to change just because we're having a conversation.
Yeah,
and I think
it definitely is.
that's really helpful, especially within the witchcraft community,
Oh, definitely.
right?
I mean, I think so. Well, just anyone I know would be frowned down upon to say anything negative. Yeah, everyone I know supports sex work is, I guess, what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I love, again, the fact that you have a spell in here to protect sex workers is wonderful for people who are sex workers, and is also wonderful for people who love someone who happens to be a sex worker, and let's be very clear, for those of you who don't know, the term for, sex workers is anyone from a stripper to a phone sex operator. We're not just talking about prostitutes, we're talking about anybody who runs a naughty shop, that can be considered sex work. So, and these people can be victimized just by the nature of their job. And let's be honest, if people weren't paying them for their services, they wouldn't have a job. So let's not be all high and mighty that this is not something that people should be doing, because there's a market for it. Okay. I'll just put that out there. I'm just
Yes, most certainly always existed.
Oldest profession. I was out in Portland, Oregon before the pandemic, and I'm going to try to keep my story short because it's like one of my favorite stories, but I'm going to keep it short. And we met some burlesque people. We went to a burlesque show. We hit it off with some of the dancers. We became friends with them. I can see you doing burlesque. I bet you're fucking fantastic at it. I don't have the body confidence to do it, but I've always wanted to. So we went to burlesque. We met these great people. We befriended them, and they took us to another club on another night. And it was a Sunday night where all the sex workers, it was sex worker night. So, and if you were a sex worker, you got into the club for free that night and you could watch the performers. And they had everything from like burlesque dancers, strippers, some girl fucking a cake. It was awesome. It was, there were fire dancers and acrobats and girls dancing on the ceiling. It was like one of the best nights ever. Okay. It was so much fun. But it was so cool because we actually got to be with the people of that community. And they were just so loving and supportive and close to each other. And I don't think until that moment, I realized there was such a community. For me, I kind of thought about sex workers as like we as witches tend to be there's the solitary witch practitioners, and then you have community practitioners, right? I kind of saw it the same way. I was like, oh, I kind of guess I thought the stripper probably just goes home. She just does this by herself. But these communities of sex workers, it kind of blew my mind. Is that something that you've seen as well?
Well, they have to. I mean, no one else is protecting them.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
You're
yes, that is
right.
absolutely true.
You're right. So that obviously, besides that, in the book, can you talk a little bit about more of the protection magic that could be used if you're in a situation where you're having an issue? What kind of things could people find in your book related to protection magic around sex?
God, I wish I had a copy in front of me, because I have to admit, I
You
don't know
forget
if I
after a while, right? I know.
quote the names of the spells off the top of my head.
Mhm.
I guess just themes I would want to say is that I I don't really think breakups are a frivolous thing. I think,
Mm,
well, I mean, they can be. It depends how
mm,
much you're in love with the person, right? But even if you weren't and it's just a massive loss, we really like to downplay that, just be like, oh, get over it. Or like, especially for men, like I feel like men are not allowed to grieve their romantic partners at
yeah.
all. And so I wanted to kind of honor heartbreak by including a lot of stuff surrounding the end of a relationship, because mourning is a ritual, and a lot of times going through practices like some of the spells in the book can help you get over a breakup by confronting it and dealing with it. So there's stuff on safer sex, because like I think as witches, it's ridiculous to try to exclude science from the conversation. And like I
Yeah.
totally have a vial from like my favorite herbal, or a tincture from my favorite herbalist, that's like an antiviral protection vial of herbal remedies that I like got when I was single, because I didn't want to get herpes, to be honest.
Yeah. Who wants herpes?
But I just mean at the same time, like if I did, I would go to a like medical doctor and like,
Yes.
get the prescription. I just mean that I wanted to give people, I want to say, here are some great herbs that have some cool things, but also like wear condoms, like I just wanted to, I don't want someone to like get an STI and then come emailing me like your spell didn't work, I have chlamydia, and I'm like, you have to use a condom too,
Right. Right.
So I
Right.
just mean, I tried to be real about that as well.
Well, yeah. I mean, there's a difference between, you can't just protect your energetic shield. Because if we could
Exactly.
all just protect our energetic shield, COVID would have gone away. Okay. So let's be reality. You have to have, in my opinion, you need both. You need a little bit of everything. So I'm going to protect my energetic shield. I'm going to do all my shielding and I'm going to do all my magical work, but I'm still going to make sure that I take my birth control pills and use condoms because I'm
Exactly.
not stupid, like, yeah, okay. Yeah, absolutely. 100%. And I think it's very important that you bring that up, because you can't separate the physical act of sex or sexual acts from the magic portion of it, right? You can't delineate them, because you're doing physical acts. It's not just, oh, I'm going to light some incense. Oh, I'm going to light a candle. Oh, I'm going to call the corners. That's not just what this is. You could physically put your body or your partner's body through something or in danger without even realizing it, especially when you get into the kink stuff, which again, I love that you dive really deep into the kink stuff. One of the things that I thought was really a term I hadn't heard, which was RACK, RACK. Can you tell us what that is?
Yes, RAC stands for risk aware consensual kink. That means that all parties involved are aware of that means that all parties involved are aware of the risks. So for instance, let's say you're trying with paddles or spanking or some
Mhm.
part of impact play. Everyone understands that there's a safe word that you say if you want to stop, but there's a chance that like you might have a bruise on your ass. Everyone knows what they're getting into before they agree about it. So that's what risk aware consensual kink means. It's actually a newer acronym. Previously the kink community used SCC, which stands for safe, sane, and consensual. But that some people had a problem with because for some people peeing on someone sounds just nuts, right? But for other people, but there are a lot of people who are into that. And like, so, if you're going to be really kink positive, it's like, well, let's kind of take the sane out of it. That almost acts like some kinks might. I mean, yes, obviously there can be unhealthy kinks in sexual expression, but you don't want to pathologize a kink that is in fact safe, as long as, everyone wants to either pee or get peed on and they know that that's going to happen.
And doesn't that all just boil down to, I have a chapter in my book about, physical love and sex and because love, when you use the blanket term love, it just covers so many things. Just like when you use the word sex, most people immediately think intercourse, but there's so much. There's just so much. You can't really boil it down to just one thing. But crap, I lost my train of thought. It was a really good one. There's so many ways of thinking. There's so many different terms. There's so much that goes into things when it's about the physical body, that if you are, and I don't want to say this is just about with a partner or multiple partners or whatever you're into, right? Everything, in my opinion, and agree or disagree, everything in my opinion comes down to honest communication, honest, open communication, be it with self or be it with partner, right? Like, if you're not being honest with your partner, and can we just say this goes across the board for all relationships, that if I'm like, oh yeah, no, that sounds okay. That sounds fine. Yeah, you can totally do that to me. My partner hears, yeah, that's okay. That's fine. You can totally do that to me. And in my head, I'm going, I'm not sure. That's not honest and open, right?
Well, yes, you need to be clear. Passive aggressiveness rarely works, but I would say especially not in the bedroom. That seems to enter into potentialist dangerous territory if that was used.
So how do you, as a sex witch, make sure that you are honest and clear in your communication, and then receive honest and clear communication from your partner? Because there's a lot about protecting the self, but what about protecting your partner, whoever it is that you are engaging with at that time?
Protecting them from what? Just everything, just like.
Well, listen, how would you make sure that that partner is not doing something with you at your urging that you didn't misunderstand? And is there something to do magically?
How do you avoid like stepping on their consent ground?
Correct.
Magically, I find this magical. The most important thing I would say is to really try to stay grounded in the present moment, to stay attuned with them, but honest communication. But I do want to recognize that is very, very hard.
Yes.
Even definitely myself, even the best sex doctors and researchers and therapists I know have trouble constantly perfectly communicating their desires with their partners. Sex, even for sex positive people, is very delicate and very sensitive, and it's very easy to get your feelings hurt when you're
ego is a bitch.
So the answer is communication, but I think it takes practice, and I know mine has certainly improved, but I feel like I have a lot of work to do.
Yeah. I really love that you validated how hard that is.
It's very hard.
It's really, really hard. Even for, as you're saying, sitting there, admittedly, you wrote a book called Sex Witch. People will look at you and go, oh, hey, Sex Witch. And you're sitting here saying, I find that difficult. I think that helps validate someone else who could be feeling shy and be like, there's no way I could be forthcoming, and go, oh, well, okay, it's
Well,
okay
sex
to be
is also
shy.
complicated and confusing, and sometimes you do change your mind, or sometimes you try something and you don't like it, or maybe you have really wanted to have a threesome and you're having it, it's great, and then all of a sudden something throws you off and makes you feel uncomfortable like that. You might get really emotional during sex when you're unprepared. It's just a vulnerable space, so it's messy. Sex is messy, physically, emotionally, like that's kind of why it's hot. But
right, it's equal hot, it's equal parts hot and equal parts crazy and messy and and very scary. I mean, even if you're with your partner for a long time, whether you've been with your partner for a long time or you're with a new partner or you're trying something new, things can always change and they can always feel uncomfortable. Like you said, you could just be in the middle of something that you were like, oh yeah, this is great, and 2 seconds go by and all of a sudden you're not okay. And I
oh
think
yeah,
it's
that's for
so
everyone. And then if you have like any sexual trauma, it's just like amplified times a million. So
right.
so don't be too hard on yourself if you haven't gotten it perfectly.
We'll just keep practicing until we get it right. I mean, that's it, right?
Yeah.
This book it's really great and it's really comprehensive and it is fun. You think you put a lot of fun into it. I think you address what needs to be addressed and you give it the weight that it needs, but you still keep the heart of, this is pleasure. We're doing this for pleasure. We're doing it for joy, for ourselves, to pleasure for ourselves and for others who we're experiencing sexual acts with. So I really can't say enough good things about this book. It's just, and the spell work is easy and accessible. It's not like the kind of thing where you have like 78 steps and you're like, seriously, the spell isn't done yet.
Well, I hate that. Sometimes you look at things and you're like, this spell is going to cost me like $370 to do. Like, fuck this. Like, I'm watching Netflix. Like,
exactly. And it really is. I think you're really wonderful. And I love your sex positive mindset, whether it is in this book or on your Instagram feed or in your other works. And I think you're fucking gorgeous. And I look at you and I'm like, oh my God, wish I had her hair and I wish I had her eyes and she's so skinny and all of these things. But you specifically exude body positivity, and that you make other people around you feel more beautiful with your love and acceptance of them in whatever body that they're in. And I don't think that's something you can teach people. I think that's just something that you are. I think people
everyone
gravitate
should read
towards you.
Glamour Witch, which is all about that and comes out January 1st of next year.
So what a great segue. Let's segue into what you're working on now, so that everybody's going to buy Sex Witch after hearing this, and then they're going to go buy your new book, which is coming out when?
Glamour Witch comes out January 1st, 2023, and then Weed Witch comes out, I believe, fall of 2023.
That is awesome, because this episode isn't going to air until the fall. So we are recording it now at the beginning of summer, but it is going to air probably in September, October. So as we're recording this, you guys, you could like go and probably even almost pre-order Glamour Witch. Tell us all. Yay! Tell us all about Glamour Witch.
Well, Glamour, if you don't know, actually meant it was taken from English, which their word for grammar, which is interesting to me because already there's an element of basic spell work in there. But it was first used in Scotland to describe the act of casting a magical spell. If you've ever watched like True Blood, the vampires can like glamour people, and they just basically make them see, like, look at them through starry glasses, and they're so much more beautiful and so much more confident and put together. So the concept is that if beauty is really subject to genetics and societal expectations, then glamour is things within your own control, like everything from body modifications to makeup to confidence. To confidence is pretty much the main thing. But there's just so many interesting historical references about things like lipstick being considered a tool of witchcraft, because it could, potentially lure in a husband and make you appear more attractive than you actually are. And, I'm Aurora magazine, which is a beauty magazine's horoscope writer, and I love beauty and hair and makeup and all of that stuff. So I just thought it was so fascinating. And I am like all glamour, like, this hair is like from a Revlon box, to be honest with you, the color. And like, there's just a million tricks to like glamour your way into looking like a Disney princess. And that's what this book is about.
I love it. I love it. I love it. That's great.
But I think it was so interesting because it's kind of funny because I'm like, well, I do, to be honest, like, put on makeup to look prettier. So like, were they totally wrong in thinking it was like witchcraft? So I just kind of loop back and explore the word witch a little bit more. And there's a lot of fun, just glamour spells, very similar to what are found in Sex Witch, but focused on things like beauty.
And how we feel about ourselves through appearance and what we're exuding and, and again, that body positivity, right? Like fall in love with yourself. If you, if
you can't, if you can't do that, you can't do anything else, unfortunately.
I hear that.
Yeah.
I hear that. And I think it's just like loving someone else and finding beauty in someone else. It's something you have to do. It's an act. It is not
even harder.
It is. It really is. Like, okay.
So much harder.
Right. Like, okay. I knew I was going to talk to you today and I was a little bit nervous because I didn't do my eyes and I didn't do any makeup, but I have been feeling very sick this week. And I was like, you know what? I'm okay with being just me today because I haven't been feeling well. Okay. But there are plenty of times where I feel better. I make myself feel better with, well, my hair looks great. I'm just kidding. Like I do have.
You look great. But right. I mean, I feel you. That's what I did with this. I had like a hard day and I was like, oh, I'm just going to take an hour and like put my hair in hot rollers. And
you did hot rollers? That's not natural.
I love hot rollers. They're such a magic trick. They really are. Just like type in hot rollers on Amazon and get some. You just like let them sit while you do your makeup and then you unroll them.
Oh, that's great. I honestly, this is just, you can't really see it so good because I have this background on, but I have really great hair and I have really great tits and I have really great eyes. So I just play up those things, like yeah. I really just have to judge my hair and that's all I do. I don't do anything to it. And it fucking works.
It's okay to do low maintenance. I'm aware I'm extremely high maintenance in like every area of my life. I just accept that.
I'm only high maintenance when it comes to like really specific, like when it comes to food, when it comes to ingredients, like everything has to be, I need my fancy cheeses and, stuff like that. Other than I'm pretty low maintenance, but no, the idea of glamour and how do you feel when you kind of put on this face or you put on this outfit? This is a ritual attire. You are now ready to go out into the world and create your magic, or you're ready to go to your altar and create your magic because you've put on this ritual attire. When you think about people that do actual like tribal face paint, it is for a specific purpose. So why can't what we would consider fashion makeup, beauty makeup rather, why can't that be spiritual and ritual as well, right?
Well, it can. You should pre-order my book to find out.
And Sophie, how would we pre-order your book and where can we find you online?
I would really appreciate it if you followed me on Instagram because followers are kind of like currency, your publishers want to see them. And if they follow me, my handle is at the Bowie Cat, like we talked about earlier.
At the Bowie Cat on Instagram. I follow you,
Thank you.
and she posts
And
a
the
lot of
link in
really
my bio has a link to buy all my books. So that would be the best place.
excellent. And this book, The Glamour Witch, is coming out in January 2023. So you should be able to get that. You can pre-order it now.
God, it's a Capricorn. That should
Get,
be good for sales.
get the Sex Witch because it's fantastic. Pre-order Glamour Witch, and then you'll be addicted to Sophie Saint Thomas like I am, and you'll just go ahead and get the Weed Witch book. I mean, then you'll have the trilogy, and you'll be all set until her next book comes out.
Yes.
Okay, so last question as we wrap up, I ask this to every single guest that comes on. It's completely not related to anything, but it's my signature question. If so, you obviously I'm a kitchen witch, so I'm a cook. That's what I do. If you could have me cook one magical meal for you, what would it be and why?
What do you mean when you say magical?
Whatever that means to you, with intention, with thought, something that ties you back to your childhood, something that has a purpose. If you wanted it to have a magical purpose, what would it be and why? Or just your favorite meal that you haven't had in a million years. I'm a really good cook. I do two things really well, and cooking is the other one.
Okay, this is a good question. So let me think of my good answer.
It's a tough one.
No, I know my main course. I feel like I should be greedy though and like have a dessert and appetizer picked out and everything.
Well, that would be very hedonistic. So yes.
Yeah.
So like you're coming to my house for dinner.
Yeah.
What do you hope is on the menu?
Let's see. Okay, for my meal, but I don't have an appetizer yet. You have to give me another minute.
That's okay. Maybe I'll come up with something. Maybe I'll divine something that goes with your meal.
Okay. Well, I am an animal lover, but the truth is I'm such a carnivore.
There's nothing wrong with that.
I know. So, but like, I love veal.
It's so naughty. It's very naughty.
I love veal. And I know my mom's boyfriend is a farmer, like a actual farmer in Virginia. And he doesn't eat veal because he knows how they're like raised. And he's like, it's too inhuman. You can't have veal. But I, when I can compartmentalize that knowledge, love veal. So I would like veal parmesan, but I want like the veal to like have the best life in the world and somehow jump into the life of like another animal and like not be harmed in the creation of this process.
So it needs to be humanely raised. It needs to be humanely
raised.
No,
it needs to die and then be resurrected into its old self and live a beautiful life.
I completely get that. And you're going veal parmesan. Okay, go ahead.
And then I would like a side of pasta with basil pesto sauce. Ooh. And I would like that's to be made with pine nuts and infused. I want it to be a money spell.
Yeah, so we would do roasted pine nuts, and we could do basil as the primary, but for extra many magic, we can throw some arugula in there and give it a little kick.
Oh, okay. I trust you on that.
Yeah.
So that's my main course. I want pasta pesto and veal and a magic veal. And then for my dessert, I want a magical red velvet cake that has a marriage spell inside of it.
Did you say a marriage spell? It's right there. Oh my. Oh my. Oh my. So I actually have a red velvet cake recipe in my cookbook. Maybe I'm just going to send you a copy. And
you totally should.
It is the most, out of all the recipes that I made in that cookbook, it was the hardest recipe that I came up with. I made it like 4 or 5 times before I got it right. And it's so fucking good. And you make it with the candied rose petals and
yes.
Yeah, it's all about the intention. So you're surprising me because you went with a really Italian meal, and I'm surprised when you said veal. I'm surprised that you went veal parmesan and you didn't go parmesan. I'm surprised you didn't go veal saltimbocco, because veal saltimbocco is so much more decadent and it's so much more like
It's just,
Ugh,
I used
fancy.
to, well, that's just nostalgia. My mom
Yeah.
make veal parmesan and taught me how to make it. So that's
Mm.
just what comes to my
I
mind.
love that. I love that. That's
I would
fantastic.
trust you with the body of our soon to be reincarnated veal, to make it as delicious as possible.
So as an appetizer, what can we make you for? See, now I feel like a veal
Well, this is
parmesan.
what I was wondering. So then I was like approaching it from a magical angle. So we have love and we have money.
Mhm.
So let's do something for like confidence and like a good like self-esteem booster.
But it still needs to be with the theme here for
It
me,
still needs to be
the
Italian.
the flavor theme. So I would do a zucchini pinwheel. So I would slice a
Ooh,
zucchini because zucchini, because of its fabulous phallic shape, any foods that have a phallic shape are really about confidence and virility and kind of like digging in your heels and going for your goals. They're really, really masculine foods. So they carry with them those traits of masculinity of like, I'm going to do this thing and I don't give a shit who gets in my way. Right. So I would
yeah.
do a zucchini pinwheel. So you
Okay.
slice it really, really thin, you grill it, and then you make a garlic, well, I make a garlic cream cheese
Oh,
filling,
I love garlic.
roll it up together, and then you douse it with a little bit of marinara sauce, which would be the same marinara sauce that I would use on the veal parmesan. So you
Nice.
have continuity there, but that would be like a very, and cheese, anything dairy is filled with joyful and nurturing energy. So you're kind of bringing together this go-getting, uh, you know, male energy of like, I got this, covered with this beautiful, like, baby, we know you got this. Chill out. Here's all the joy and here's all the nurturing that you need to reach that goal through the cheese energy. So you've got it all covered there. I'm just saying, I want to eat that meal right the fuck now.
Sounds incredible. Yeah, send me like a Google invite and I'll be there.
Come on. I'm only here. I'm in New England, so I'm just an hour out of Boston. So anytime you're up in Boston or you're visiting Salem, Massachusetts, you let me know, honey, and I will
Oh,
cook you. I will cook for you.
I might actually be in Salem this fall, but I can't announce it publicly, but I'll slide into your DMs about it.
Please do.
Yes.
The amazing Sophie Saint Thomas.
Thank you so much for having me. This was
I
really
just had the
fun.
greatest time. You are so amazing. Thank you so, so much for being here on this episode of Conversational Witchcraft. Until next time, I wish you many blessings and so much gratitude. Thank you so much, Sophie.
Bye.